So maybe, Charlotte, you can continue to admit people while I do a quick little welcome and intro, and then we'll get underway. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for Amplifying Climate Awareness. As you heard, we are recording this session, and it'll be available up on our YouTube channel probably within a week or so. Presenting this morning, we have from the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, Frances Delaney and Casey Clunas, both are policy analysts. And from CLIMAtlantic, we have Alex Cadell, who is a climate services specialist. So they'll be presenting to us this morning for approximately 40 to 45 minutes. And then we'll finish up with a question and answer period. And we'd ask that you hold any questions, please, until that time period. And during the Q&A, you can unmute and ask your question. If you're more comfortable typing in the chat, we can monitor that as well. So feel free to store up your questions and get engaged. And I understand that the three of them will be doing some polling and making this interactive as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Judy. I will just share my screen here. All right, can everyone see that?
We can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about climate change and climate services. Just to briefly introduce myself and my colleague Casey, we come from the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, which is part of Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're both policy analysts and outreach specialists, and we've both been with Environment Canada for about 4 to 6 years, and both have a strong climate change adaptation background. And so what to expect today? First, I'll give an introduction to climate change in general and some of the risks that Nova Scotia might face specifically. And then we'll get into what the Centre for Climate Change Services is, the CCCS. Then we'll go through some climate data and tools that might be useful for you and some support moving forward. And then we'll pass it off to Alex after that. So just looking at climate change and where are we now? And so over the past 150 years, the globe as a whole has warmed by about 1.5 degrees Celsius. And in different parts of the world, we're experiencing different rates of warming. And so in Canada, we're actually warming at twice that rate. And in our north, about 3 times that rate. And in the climate modeling world, we typically model for 3 different greenhouse gas emission scenarios. And under all of these 3 different emissions, we can expect to see Canada to continue warming. And if we look at the highest emission scenario, so if we continue to accelerate emitting greenhouse gas emissions, we could see up to an 8-degree increase in temperature in Canada by the end of the century. And so most of you have probably heard in the news, 2023 was the hottest year on record. So this is a graph basically showing average annual temperatures compared to that pre-industrial time period. And so it's been over 47 years since we've had a colder than average year globally. So this is, you can really see the warming happening over time here. And so in Nova Scotia, specifically, we're looking at how has Nova Scotia been changing in terms of its climate. So we're seeing that Nova Scotia is becoming wetter and warmer. So total annual precipitation, so that being snow and rain, we're seeing up to 50 millimeters more per year since 1976 to 2005. And we could see about 340 millimeters per year above that average by 2070 if we're considering that highest emission scenario. We're also seeing an increase in average annual temperature. So since that same average time period, we've seen an increase of almost 2 degrees, and that number could rise to about 5.4 by 2070. We're also seeing later times for that first fall frost, so back in that 1976 to 2005 time period, that date was usually October 15th. And now we're seeing that date at around October 30th. And by 2070, that number could be up until late November that we're seeing a late fall frost. And we're also seeing an increase of very hot days, so days above 30 degrees. We've already seen a 4-day increase per year since that 76 to 2005 average. And we could see up to 30 more of those days by 2070. And so what does that mean? So when we talk about heat, we have been seeing an increase in frequency and intensity of these heat waves. And this can pose many different health impacts directly, such as heat stroke and heat-related illnesses. We can also see some indirect effects like mental health problems and sometimes even death from extreme heat. We're also at risk of more wildfires in the future. So more warmer weather, less snowpack, that can really increase our risk of more wildfires. And in 2023, we set another record for most area burned in Canada from a wildfire season. So about 18.4 million hectares were burned last year. And these fires are becoming more likely and more intense, and that is a direct consequence of the warming that we're seeing. We can also see an increase in flooding impacts, and flooding can happen from many different phenomena. So flooding can happen from extreme rainfall, like we saw last summer in Nova Scotia. We can also see flooding from hurricanes, storm surges, rivers being blocked up by ice jams, high tides, and sea level rise. And flooding has actually been caused as the leading cause of property damage in Canada. And we're also seeing some marine impacts as well. As many of you already know, sea level rise is a big concern in Atlantic Canada. The map on the top right there is a sea level projections map from climatedata.ca, and this is showing until the end of the century in the highest emission scenario. But you could see that there are parts of Nova Scotia that could rise by about 150 centimeters. And this can cause higher storm surges and coastal flooding. And we're also seeing warmer ocean temperatures. And actually we had a marine heat wave last summer. And that's what that second map is showing, is the sea surface temperatures there. And warming temperatures can also lead to ocean acidification, and it can also cause more fuel for hurricanes. And so all of these events that we're seeing in Canada, they have been costing a lot of damage in both insured and uninsured losses. This is a map from 1983 to 2022 on insured losses in Canada. We expect 2023 to be one of the top numbers as well, but we are seeing that all of these events are really costing a lot of money. And it's the new normal is about 2 billion now per year in insured losses. So now I'll pass it over to Casey, and she'll walk us through what the CCCS is and how we might be able to help.
Francis, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. I'm going to speak a little bit to our program, the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. So the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, or the CCCS, as I'll probably refer to it throughout the presentation, provides Canadians with information and support to consider climate change in their decisions. That's kind of our mission or mandate statement and what we do in a really small nutshell. So next slide, please. So a little bit more background. Our organization was created in 2018 within Environment and Climate Change Canada at the federal level. So we collaborate with provinces, territories, climate science experts to provide climate data and information, as well as tools to help Canadians consider climate change in their decisions. So we help a really broad range of users. So it can be from any sector within Canada, any professional background. If you're looking to use climate data and information, we're here to help. So a little bit about some of our services. Just back to the last slide. Thanks, Francis. So we increase awareness and access to existing climate information and data in a manner that is hopefully understandable and usable to the audience. And I'll speak a little bit more about how we will do that, or how we do that in the next few slides. We provide support for incorporating climate change considerations into decisions through things like our Climate Services Support Desk. And I will touch on that again later too, but basically we have an email or web form that you can reach out to, and we have people available to help if you have questions about climate data, climate adaptation, anything within the realm of climate change and climate adaptation, we're there to help. We also host various training sessions. We engage with users to understand their needs in terms of climate data, what it is that they need, what format they need the data in, that kind of thing. And we use that information as much as we can to develop new products through collaboration with those users as well as with experts. All right, next slide. Thank you. So this circle here represents the adaptation cycle. You may have seen something similar. There are a few different versions out there, but they're going to follow more or less the same elements. So you can see there's a star next to the second step, which is understand how the climate will change. And so this is really where climate data will play a key role in determining how to adapt to climate change. And so this is where CCCS really plays a key role in facilitating access to that data. And so once you kind of move along from that step, I won't go too far into it, but that's kind of where your expertise comes in, or where other expertise comes in, because once you understand the impacts and the potential climate changes that you're going to see, then you really need to take a look at your context, because it's very different depending on what existing vulnerabilities are there, what kind of exposure you have to things like hazards. And that information really comes from experts like yourself who are working in the communities. Next slide, please. So another thing that we do is support a network of regional climate service organizations to provide access to local services across Canada. So obviously Canada is a very large and regionally diverse country, so it's really helpful to have these more localized services for various parts of the country to have their local needs kind of met and understood. So you'll be the most familiar with CLIMAtlantic, who operates in the Atlantic provinces in Canada, but there are a number of others throughout the country as well that you might be familiar with. So Uranos operates predominantly in Quebec, though they do provide a few national services as well. Orca is the newest one that we've added, which is based in Ontario. Climate West operates in the prairies. The Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium is predominantly British Columbia and parts of the Yukon. And in the north, we have an integrated northern service delivery model, which we are currently in the development of. So it's not fully up and running yet, but we are working on a solution for the north. Next slide, please. So together with this network of climate service providers, we have a large range of portals and resources where users can go to access data. So what's on the screen now is by no means a fully comprehensive list of all the tools and resources that are out there, but there are many. And so they are often tailored towards different user groups, different levels of comfortability with climate data. So some are very geared towards those who are super comfortable with working with raw data, doing analysis on that data. And then some are more geared towards those who are just beginning their climate change journey. So things like the Climate Atlas are really good places to start if you're just beginning your climate adaptation journey. I'm going to spend some time speaking about climatedata.ca today in a little bit more detail. Before I do that, I wanted to mention the map of adaptation actions. So this is just another tool that CCCS supports. It was developed with the Canadian Centre for Climate Services and Natural Resources Canada. So this is a website where you can go to see a collection of examples of communities and sectors adapting to climate change across Canada. So there's hundreds of examples of climate adaptation on the map. There are many from Nova Scotia. There's already a lot of really great work happening. And yeah, so you can filter these examples using a set of filters that we have available. You can search via keyword. You can just pan around the map and search for a specific location. And they also have access to the Canada and a Changing Climate reports, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's a set of reports led by Natural Resources Canada that kind of speak to the various impacts of climate change that we have already seen in Canada and that we'll be expecting to see in the future. All right, so I'll dive into some climate data tools. And so I'm predominantly going to be speaking to climatedata.ca in this section here. So climatedata.ca is CCCS's most important dissemination mechanism for climate data. So this website, and you may be familiar with it, but this website is a collaboration between ourselves, Canadian Centre for Climate Services, and the Computer Research Institute of Montreal, which is kind of an IT specialist organization, as well as with our regional climate service providers that I mentioned a couple slides back. So it was built for users who require access to local climate data, including a range of climate variables and indices, as well as user-defined climate data sets for use in things like adaptation work, engineering studies, research, education, and more. So it serves quite a broad audience with a broad set of needs. It provides Canada-wide climate data, including both climate model projections and historical data. It allows users to explore simulations of past climate, future climate under a range of different emission scenarios. It also offers a learning zone where users can learn more about the science behind climate data, how to choose and access data. You can learn more about understanding future projections or understanding historical data. There's a number of different modules there if you are just getting started and want to learn a little bit about it. There's also some examples about how climate data has been applied to assess risk and make adaptation decisions across Canada, which I'll speak briefly to it in a future slide here. So next slide, please. Thanks, Francis. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to that's available on climatedata.ca is our Analyze tool. So the Analyze tool offers a platform for customization without the need for coding skills. So users can pinpoint specific grid cells or specific 10 by 10 kilometer locations, essentially. Or you can select things such as health regions or census regions, depending on what it is that you're interested in. You can set unique thresholds for various climate indices, including things like heat waves. And you can customize your analysis by choosing the emissions pathways of interest that you're interested in seeing the projections for. So once you've done all this, set all your customizations and options, you can then download the data. And so it's processed on the fly for you and sent directly to your email. So this kind of offers a unique opportunity for those who maybe aren't as well-versed in the data, but still kind of know what they need in terms of customized projections. So I just want to draw your attention now to a few of our newer products. So the first being Humidex. So this is something we've added to climate data in the last year or so. So Humidex is used to understand how summer weather can impact human health. And so typical projections of temperature don't account for Humidex values. So this data set is really good at showing how often people are likely to experience that discomfort or caution or extreme caution days due to that hot and humid weather in the future. This is something that's really relevant for Southern Ontario, where Francis and I live. As you can see on the screen here, it's going to get really hot and humid in the future. But if you work in public health or with vulnerable communities or outdoor workforces, this may be a data set that will be of interest to you. So the next one is the spatial analogs tool. So this tool lets you compare your potential future local climate with historical climate conditions across North America. So for this one, choosing the right indices in the app is an important step for using it effectively. So depending on what it is that you're looking to do. So for those focused on adapting to warmer summers or extreme heat in the future, for example, indices like tropical nights and days with a temperature maximum above 30 degrees potentially may be a useful starting place. So by examining places that have similar number of these hot days and warm nights as your city is expected to face in the future, you can then maybe check out what they do in terms of strategies for urban design or public health initiatives or emergency planning to combat heat waves effectively, and use that as inspiration for your own planning. So you can play around with different variables. There's lots of different options there, time periods, emission scenarios in the app, and kind of see what it is that it can offer. So there's a few different functionalities that the spatial analogs can offer. So I think the last slide here on climatedata.ca. So you'll find on climatedata.ca multiple sector modules. And these sector modules have examples of how climate data has been applied to assess risk and make adaptation decisions across Canada. So currently we have examples within the health, buildings, transportation, and agriculture sectors, but many of them are applicable across sectors as well. On the screen right now is a little sneak peek of some of the other topics that we also have available within those different sectors on climatedata.ca. So if any of those are of interest to you in your work, I encourage you to check those out. So that's it for climatedata.ca, and I just want to end off on some examples of municipal adaptation. So there's quite a bit of work already happening in Nova Scotia and across Canada, so I just want to highlight a few of those. So this first example concerns how climate change and extreme weather events like high winds, storm surges, flooding are causing damage to critical transportation routes. This is specifically in Annapolis Royal, which are those transportation routes are obviously necessary for delivering things like emergency services and responding to health and other environmental emergencies. So at the same time, the province has been projecting increased demand for emergency services due to these extreme weather events, and also complicated further by the province's aging demographic. In response to this, the provincial level officials worked with planners and managers to develop strategies for rerouting transportation lanes and updating design standards for infrastructure to ensure that climate change is considered in new projects. So locally, municipalities are utilizing things like flood maps to warn future developers of projected risks from storm surges and associated flooding. And so in Annapolis Royal, for example, flood maps identified that the town's fire hall was at risk of being cut off from the rest of the community in the event of a projected storm surge flooding event. And so the fire department was able to take that information and use it to adapt their emergency response plan, including purchasing a boat and redistributing some rescue equipment throughout the community. So the second example is for Kings County in Nova Scotia. So to plan for climate change, including things like an increase in frost-free growing days, severe weather, and potential for flooding, the municipality of the County of Kings in Nova Scotia developed a climate change action plan through their Kings 2050 project. So because of resource-based industries such as agriculture, forestry, and fishing, and the fact that a lot of residents in this area live near water, climate change is a very real concern for this municipality. So while they were expecting some potential upsides for segments of these industries, such as an increase in frost-free growing days, which can be beneficial for the agriculture sector, severe weather, erosion, and prolonged periods of drought, among others, are very much at the forefront as potential impacts that needed to be understood and prepared for. So as part of the Kings 2050 project, a climate change adaptation plan was developed for Kings County. And so one example from this plan is to combat sea level rise, flooding, and extreme precipitation events from impacting access to sewage treatment plants. They installed things like backflow valves to keep excess water from backing up the systems, increasing the height of lagoon berms. And one future potential action was to review the access road design to ensure that the long-term access to the plant and its components was going to be possible. So those are just two examples, both of which are available on the map of adaptation actions. If you are interested in checking out some more of the details, I'd encourage you to go there and see, and also some of the other great examples from Nova Scotia. So I am coming to the end here, I think, but just wanted to plug our Climate Service Support Desk again. So this is a resource that you can reach out to for support in using climate data, choosing climate data. If you don't know where to start, it's a good resource. So you can send them an email or get in touch with us through our website. And then the next slide, I think, is a plug for our social media for climatedata.ca. So if you are interested in keeping up to date and kind of seeing what's available as we add it to the site, I encourage you to check us out on social media. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. And if you're interested in doing that, you can go to climatedata.ca and you'll be able to subscribe under the news tab at the top. I think that is the end of our section. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please hold on to them and we can get to those at the end of the presentation. And I think I pass it along to Alex at this point.
Perfect. Thanks, Casey, and good morning, everyone. Just as a quick reminder for those of you who may have trickled in after the first couple of minutes there, I'm Alex Goodell. I work with ClimAtlantic. I'm also in a shared role with the province, so Department of Environment and Climate Change, and I am your climate services specialist for the province of Nova Scotia. So really just wanted to build on all of the great things that Francis and Casey were talking about. It's so much easier to find trusted, high quality data than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And really, we're here to help you use information like that in the context of the decisions you're trying to make, the understanding you're trying to build, and how climate change is impacting the things that we really care about at a very local level. The health of the people in our communities, the built assets that we are responsible for managing, health of our local environment, livelihoods of people in our province, all of these different things. So with ClimAtlantic, we're here to help you understand those changes and really just increase your ability to make informed decisions about the future. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here to highlight some of the tools, supports, and resources that we have available through ClimAtlantic that are just a phone call or email away for all of you. And that starts with, I guess, just highlighting what ClimAtlantic is as an organization. So I realize some of the formatting here might have come across a little bit weird in our transfer of slides. That's okay. Bear with me. It looked nice when I sent it. ClimAtlantic is the climate services hub for Atlantic Canada. We're still a relatively young organization. If you haven't encountered us before, we're established in late 2021. But have been quite busy since then because there's been a lot of demand from folks like yourselves to sort of understand this whole climate change thing. We are an independent nonprofit organization that we are financially supported by all 4 provincial governments in Atlantic Canada, as well as the federal government through Environment and Climate Change Canada. And we are here to provide free, publicly accessible support for all types of organizations that are looking to consider climate change impacts in their decisions. So I work with a lot of provincial government departments, certainly with many municipalities, but also nonprofits, academic researchers, Indigenous organizations, individuals, really anyone who's trying to figure out what this climate change thing is and what it means for what they care about. We're here as your sort of local resource for that. And really our goal overall is to help make the entire process of climate change adaptation a little bit more accessible. So that starts with the data piece, but we're here every step of the way to help you access funding, go through some of the tools that are out there, and really just understand how we can support you in moving your adaptation actions a little bit further along. Next slide, please. So if that idea of accessing free services for climate adaptation sounds interesting, but you're not exactly sure what that type of service might be, that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about for the next little bit here. So some examples here include things like support for accessing and understanding information, connecting people like yourselves with resources and expertise in the region, developing and sharing different tools for climate change adaptation, addressing knowledge and research gaps, delivering training, funding opportunities, communications and engagement work. And I will expand more on each of those things with the next set of slides. Really just wanted to highlight as well that the ClimAtlantic does have its own support desk, as does CCCS. We're very closely in touch on very technical questions and making sure that we're providing consistent information in our region. But if you forget how to get a hold of me, it's easy to find information through our website, which is just climatlantic.ca, CLIMatlantic.ca, spelled the way it is there. And we also have our own suite of social media where we're pretty easy to track down. Feel free to reach out to me directly or contact us via the help desk there. But next slide, please, and I'll talk through some of those services that I just mentioned. So we'll start with the climate data piece as well. And of course, feel free to go directly to CCCS for data-specific questions, but we're here to help with that as well. We can provide support with accessing and particularly with understanding both historical and projected climate change data. I have had a lot of requests over the last couple of years just for presentations for different groups, for example, to come out and talk to a council meeting or an environment and climate advisory meeting or something like that, just to provide that expert perspective on the information that you're trying to use for a specific purpose. So always available for things like that. For staff that are using portals like climatedata.ca and some of those other fantastic resources that are mentioned, here to provide, one-on-one support. I can come out to where you are, or we can have a quick virtual meeting, talk through specifically if there's a certain data challenge you're encountering. We can talk through that together, access information that I think is relevant, talk through how to access and understand that information, provide some guidance on how to communicate that to decision makers or the public that you're working with. Start to finish, we're here to help with that as well. And ultimately just provide some guidance on what types of information might be helpful for considering in the decisions that you're trying to make. So that's kind of our bread and butter, but we do other things as well. So we can go to the next slide and talk through some other resources that we have on offer. Connecting people with each other is certainly a huge one as far as we're concerned. There's a lot of great work that's happening, not just within our province, but across the Atlantic region as well. And we recognize how powerful it is to connect with others that are trying to do work, particularly, a lot of our municipalities are small, limited capacity. So being able to connect with NGOs, with academics, with government departments that have an interest in supporting the work that you're doing can be really empowering for advancing the work that you're doing and just increasing the resources that you have available. So we have a networking map that is available on our website. This is a resource to help people in Atlantic Canada find the climate adaptation services that they require. So I think there's a couple hundred pins on there right now of, again, people working in municipal, federal, provincial governments, a lot of the nonprofits that are active in the climate adaptation space, some of the researchers, some of the individuals that really have an interest and sort of expertise in these different areas. So if you're curious about who is doing work near you, it's just a great resource to access that. If any of you are doing work and weren't aware that this resource exists and want other people to be able to access you more easily, I would encourage you to go to the networking map, add your pin there. It's pretty easy to find under the tools section on our website. And through that, you can filter by specialty. So who has expertise in coastal or whatever that may be, location, sector, really just easily search for and connect with individuals and organizations working in climate adaptation across our region. It's a lot of fantastic expertise. And I think the more we work together, the easier it is to do this kind of work. Next slide, please. Tools is another piece that I mentioned. I'll just highlight one that we have been using quite a lot recently, which is our Coastal Adaptation Toolkit. So it's actually an update of a tool that's been around for a number of years, but we did a lot of work to update this with the latest information, make it a lot more publicly accessible, make it a lot more user-friendly. So this is an online decision support tool that can help inform adaptation to coastal flooding and erosion in communities and at properties all around the coast of Atlantic Canada. Really how it does this is by evaluating what types of coastal interventions, so engineering options, nature-based approaches, things like that, as well as land use planning tools may be appropriate for specific sites. So it's basically an online questionnaire. You go in and answer certain questions about what type of sediment the site is made out of, what type of flooding or erosion it's being exposed to, who has the authority to make land use planning decisions at the site, and it will spit out a ranked list of options basically about, hey, have you considered a living shoreline at this site? Because based on the characteristics of it, it might be a really good consideration. So it's not a substitute for site-specific professional advice, but it does make that initial layer of advice so much more accessible. You don't have to hire an engineer to come out and talk through some of those initial considerations. It'll help you narrow down what types of interventions might make sense, and then help direct you on kind of where to go from there. So it's a fantastic resource. Really encourage you to check it out if you weren't aware of it already. And it's available in community and property scale versions. So community really for municipalities such as yourselves that have some land use planning authority as part of your mandates, as well as for individual property owners. So if you're getting questions from a certain landowner about what they can do at their site, you can direct them to this as well. And that version really just excludes the land use planning tools. Yeah, so that's a tool available and also available to offer training on it or help you interpret results and things like that as well. Next slide, please. In terms of addressing knowledge gaps in research, I just wanted to highlight a few key resources that we've worked on over the last couple of years that might be specifically relevant to yourselves as municipalities. One being a report on climate risk, responsibility, and liability related to climate change flood risks specifically. So this is something that we worked on with East Coast Environmental Law. It was a review and analysis of legal information that identified potential sources of municipal responsibility to consider, manage, and disclose climate change flood risks in Atlantic Canada, and explores those sources of responsibility in 3 spheres of municipal activity. So managing municipal infrastructure, land use planning, and development permitting. Again, great resource just to understand what legal requirements might be out there or forthcoming in the years to come as you're working with climate change related flood data and what responsibilities might be in place to disclose that and work with it as a municipality. There was another interesting paper on managed retreat, which is a discussion paper that explores the concepts and the realities of retreat strategies, so managed or otherwise, as is often the case, in response to flooding and erosion hazards. So while retreats or moving back from the coasts in response to things like flooding and erosion is often identified as a very cost-effective long-term solution to these kind of hazards, the reality is often a lot more complex. It can be controversial, it can be politically unappealing. So this is a paper that outlines some of the groundwork needed for a retreat to be considered as an economically viable, socially acceptable, equitable strategy for enhancing resilience in Atlantic Canada. So a great resource there if you're working through any of those thorny topics. Adaptation infographics series. So this was a communication product to help support conversations with different sectors about what adaptation looks like within their sphere, highlighting some of the key hazards and opportunities that can be informed by climate data. So we created a series of 5 so far. We may continue this in the future if there continues to be interest, but things like buildings, forestry, water and wastewater infrastructure, the buildings one is shown on the right there. Realize it's small, but really just highlighting, if you have someone that is responsible for operating a building and they're interested in climate change, but not exactly sure how it connects to them, this is a great starting point for discussion. So, okay, rising temperatures, that's an impact of relevance. It has to do with how our heating and cooling system and demand might evolve in the future. More intense storms, okay, that might bring some flooding, that might bring some enhanced opportunity for power outages, things like that. Sea level rise and storm surge, let's think about coastal flooding and erosion, indirect impacts on supply chains, availability and cost of insurance, things like that. Highlighting some of the common adaptation approaches to that and ways to move forward. So again, great resource just to start some discussions with folks that are newer to climate change. And another one I'll highlight here is extreme weather adaptation options. This is actually coming out probably next week or 2 with our next newsletter. You'll be able to access these. This was a project where we researched inventories of adaptation options for 6 climate-related hazards. So extreme heat, drought, wildfire, coastal flooding, inland flooding, and high wind, along with 2-page summary documents that outline a lot of the ways for individuals, communities, and municipalities to adapt through planning ahead, nature-based approaches, built infrastructure, policy and programs, things like that. So if those types of hazards are becoming more prevalent in your communities and you're wondering what options might be available to adapt to them, this is a great resource, again, to sort of understand the state of play in Atlantic Canada about what types of options might be available. And yeah, I think some exciting resources to dig into there. Everything I've just mentioned is already available, or for the case of the extreme weather adaptation options piece, will be available on the ClimAtlantic website in the near future. It's a little bit spread out right now. We're actually just in the process of creating its own page, so you can find ClimAtlantic developed resources a little bit more easily. But if any of this sounds interesting and you'd like to track it down, just let me know and I can point you right towards it. And one final piece I'll mention just here is around the, so if you can stay on that slide for just one more moment, is around the Enrich project. So this is Ingrid Waldron's Environmental Noxiousness, Racial Inequalities, and Community Health project. ClimAtlantic has been partnering on this to do some workshops with African Nova Scotian communities. We did 12 last fall and have, or in the process of planning 13 more this year to discuss climate change concerns, priorities, and ideas for taking action in African Nova Scotian communities specifically. And just given that those are spread out throughout the province, I just wanted to highlight that as a forthcoming resource and report for municipalities to understand what that really key demographic, what their thoughts are currently around climate change issues. Next slide, please. Another tool that I'll highlight briefly here is just our adaptation library, because certainly while Google is a great tool for finding many relevant pieces of information and reports, it certainly doesn't capture everything. There's a lot of great work that's been commissioned by provinces, by municipalities, consultant reports, research pieces coming out of different universities that are really tricky to track down if you don't know who's done them or when they were done or what they're called. So this was our attempt to compile a lot of that information. It currently holds about 350 reports, videos, infographics, and resources like that on climate adaptation in Atlantic Canada. We've gone through all of those resources as a team to ensure that they are accurate, they're using good information, they're categorized appropriately. So again, here you can filter by region, by climate issue, focus area, type of product, etc., to really just help you track down high quality, regionally relevant information for work that you're doing. Next slide, please. And I think this is my last kind of tool to highlight here, but I think a very common question for many folks doing this work is, this all sounds great, but how on earth do I find the money to do it? So we do have a funding opportunities page that is on our site. It currently lists about 50-ish funding programs at different national programs, regional, provincial, programs specific to Indigenous applicants, a few other categories as well. This is something that we're making a real effort as a team to keep regularly updated to reflect programs that are currently accepting applications. Again, for those of you that are submitting applications and want another set of eyes on how you're describing climate change or impacts on your local area, we're available to help with that sort of thing. And also just mention that when new large funding pots come out, we have occasionally held idea exchange sessions for finding collaborators for funding applications. So again, helping, for example, municipalities find academics or nonprofits or provincial government departments that have an interest in supporting common projects. So often working together, there's a greater chance of success for those types of things. Next slide. I think I do have one more, if you remembered. Yes, there we go. So communications and engagement, just wanted to highlight a few final things here. One being, if it sounds at all interesting to stay in touch with this sort of work, I'll highlight that we are in the process of scoping out a Nova Scotia climate adaptation community of practice. Our first event is a full day meeting in Truro next Thursday. I see a few familiar names on the call that I'm looking forward to seeing there in person. But if others weren't aware of this and you'd like to join, I think we've got about 80 or 90 people registered now, again, representing provincial governments, municipalities, nonprofits, some of the key players. It's a really good cross section of folks working on adaptation in the region. And if you'd like to join us there, I'd be really happy to have you. We're going to have some good conversations just around the landscape of adaptation in the province right now and where we'd like to see it go next. We've held a number of other engagement opportunities. We had a conference on advancing adaptation action in Atlantic Canada last spring. That was in Moncton. We had one the fall before that on flood mapping in Atlantic Canada. Really just to say, when there is need to get people together to talk about a certain topic, we'll do our best to provide the space and get the right people in the room to advance the work on that. We have a whole new training and learning program, which is really exciting. There'll be more details coming on that in the near future, providing really just the resources that people starting out in this field need to do this work well, because already there is more demand for people in these types of adaptation positions than we can fill, and that is only increasing over time. So we're trying to get Atlantic Canada up to speed on what foundational knowledge is needed to do adaptation work well. And we do have our own monthly newsletter. It's, I think about 2,000 people are subscribed to that across the region. It's really well received. A great opportunity to just stay informed on what types of events are happening, what new resources are available, new data sets that are coming out, that sort of thing. So if you're not subscribed to that already and have an interest in this work, I'd encourage you to check that out. Again, sign up on our website or follow us on your social media of choice. We're on all of the things. We're pretty easy to find. Next slide, which I think is just questions. Yes, so I believe you have a few polling questions to do first, so I'll turn things back over to Francis and Casey and welcome any questions about ClimAtlantic after that. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Alex. And Casey and Alex, if you want to participate in these poll questions, feel free. For everyone, you can either do this by your phone or your browser, but we welcome you to go to pollev.com/CCCS. Or you can join by text by sending CCCS to the number 37607. And that'll take you to our poll. Oh, I see some people have been figuring it out. So the first question we have for you is, have you used future climate data in your work before? Just a simple yes or no question. And I can't see the numbers. Let me see if I can, oops. See if that works. Okay, sorry, that might have restarted the question. If anyone who is doing that question, if you could re-enter your results. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so it looks like it's about half and half have used or haven't used climate data in your work before. I'll go to the next question. If you have used climate data before, we'd like to just know where you got your data from. And here you'll see a big list of all of the different resources we kind of mentioned in our presentations today. And yeah, if you haven't used climate data before, feel free to hit the last option there, NA. That's great. We're seeing lots of people using ClimAtlantic. That's great. Province of Nova Scotia, Oranos and Peacock. That's great. It looks like we have a big variety of uses for climate data, so that's great. I'll give maybe 30 more seconds to answer this question, and I'll move on to the next. All right. So this is a more open-ended question, but we'd like to hear from you. What is the most pressing climate change issue within your own municipality that you work in or live in? And if you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free. These are all just questions to prompt discussion, but feel free to type in your answers. They're all anonymous too, so. Coastal and overland flooding, yep. Sea level and storm surge. Flooding, yeah, flooding is a big one. Sea level rise. Yeah, flooding and erosion. Lots of flooding. Storm floofing. Wildfire, yeah. That's a big one. Extreme weather affecting unhoused citizens, increased extreme weather and hurricanes. rising temperatures. Yeah, these are all big ones. I'll just give it a couple more seconds here. Green space for cooling. Increased rainfall over short periods of time. Like that flood we saw last summer, that was so much rain in 24 hours that we saw. All right, these are great. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna go to the next question here. So within your role, do you make adaptation decisions? And if so, what kind of decisions are you making? So thinking of the last question, the major issues you're seeing in your communities, are there ways you're kind of making decisions around those? They don't have to be huge flood map, transportation rerouting decisions, but anything like planning for more heat waves and how that'll impact parks or your spaces there. So anything that comes to mind that you're considering climate change and making decisions in your work about that. Okay, that's great. Persuading our municipality to identify adaptation options. Council flooding policy for mitigation. Looking for grants to support adaptation reports. For example, a seawall, that's great. Raising critical infrastructure above sea rise level, increase maintenance on pavement facing to temperature increase and freeze thaw. Discussing with developers on how to use climate practices in their new builds. Committee Council on Public Engagement on adaptation and resiliency. Wow, these are great. Land use planning, recommendations, recommendations to the Climate Action Committee and Council. These are really great. I'll leave maybe a few more seconds here. And if anyone wants to unmute themselves and talk to any of these, feel free. All right, I'll go to the next question here. And finally, I think this is the last question we have is considering the larger issues that you're working with and some of these adaptation decisions or work that you're doing, is there any climate data that you think would be useful for you in this work, or that you've already used that you found really useful, or something that doesn't exist yet that you would hope to find really useful in these decisions? And these can be anything that any of the three of us talked about today, whether it's case studies, looking at what others have been doing, or if it's kind of raw temperature data that you're interested in, sea level rise data. Okay, so data broken down by region to present to councils and residents at their meetings. That's a good one. And Alex, I know you mentioned that you have kind of more regional data as well. I know CCCS does have based on census and healthcare region, but if there's any other regional data that you're aware of.
Yeah, I guess I'll just highlight that like what's available on CCCS is census subdivision and health region and things like that. So for some municipalities, census subdivision matches up perfectly with your boundaries, which is great. In some other cases, it's not quite that easy. The province, through the latest provincial climate change risk assessment, did look at the county boundaries. So for those of you that are in geographic regions like that, we can help you track down some of that information as well. And that'll be updated in 2025 using the latest climate modeling data as well. But happy to chat.
Great, thank you. So we're seeing sea level rise, flood mapping, that's a big one. Return periods for all kinds of weather events. Yeah, these are great. Unsure, but we'll browse your data. Oh, sorry. That basically was our last question anyways there. But if anyone has any more questions that you'd like to ask, anything you'd like to share, feel free. I think we have a few more minutes here.
We do, yeah. We're about 5 minutes out from our hour, but we can go slightly over. And if people have to leave, we understand that. So you can unmute and ask your question to any of our 3 presenters, or if you're more comfortable typing in the chat, we can monitor that as well.
I'll ask a question, Judy, if I can. I'm trying to find a place to raise my hand, but I'm not finding it. So
Just
can you
go
hear me
for it,
okay?
Eldon. Yeah,
Okay.
we can.
Just curious, I guess, in a couple of things, and I'll start at the I guess the last question first, which wasn't making it the last question. I was going to mention just in the conference that was mentioned in May in the last slide, Alex, that you had. It said 2023 in the slide, so that would be this coming May is what it should be, 2024.
Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify that conference I mentioned, that was last May 2023.
Okay,
If you're
so
curious
that
about
was-
what was talked about there, happy to chat about that.
Okay.
But we also have a community of practice, so people working on adaptation, that is coming up next week.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to
So sorry, yeah,
clarify
different
that
things there.
to make
Yeah.
sure. Oh yeah, no problem.
No, good clarification.
So I'm just curious, early on in the presentation, talked about the amount of hectares that was burnt in wildfires. Does any of the data that gets collected involve the wildlife that's affected by it, or is it simply the land and how it impacts communities and the area that the fires are happening? And I guess the reason I ask that, we always hear about more wildlife coming into our neighborhoods and our communities and disrupting where we're living. Sometimes I wonder if we're going into their neighborhoods and homes and disrupting where they're living. But how does the fires affect that? And is there any data that would be on that? Not sure who that would go to, but someone could speak to it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to look into if there is data on specific species. I think there is, and that would be through Natural Resources Canada. They are the ones that produce the fire weather forecasts as well. And so I can get back to you on where you can find more information on that.
Okay.
And yeah, that number was just total hectares that were burned. So, but I'll get back to you on specifics.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of it's the answer I expected. I expected there probably wouldn't be, but then I thought, well, if I don't ask, I won't know. But I expected there wouldn't be. But if there is something there that can be shared, that's great. But recognizing that the wildlife wouldn't be, I guess, the number one priority in regards to looking at the climate change and how it affects us that way. But I just figured I would ask the question. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Judy.
Okay. Is there anyone else with any questions or comments? We have another couple minutes. So Dimitri is asking, first of all, thanks for a very good presentation. So that's to the 3 of you, and thank you. And asking if they can get the presentation support. So I would think that's going to be possible, and we'll actually be posting the full recording on our YouTube channel, getting that out to our members. And if Francis and Casey and Alex are in agreement, we'll have the presentation as well. in a PDF format so that people, the more information that we can get out to the members, the better.
Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely.
All right, if there's no other questions right now, I'm going to wrap this up for us. I know everyone's got very busy schedules, but I definitely want to thank Francis and Casey and Alex for joining us this morning. There certainly was so much good information given there. Both of your organizations and the websites have so many different resources and toolkits there. So I think that's really important for us to get out to our members, and we'll get that out through our channels to them as well. So that everyone has, I would say some probably don't even know everything that's available to them, and it's such a hot topic, an important topic for our members. This was, in my humble opinion, useful for them. So we'll definitely share this with the rest of the members. And again, thank you, and thank you to everyone else for taking time this morning to be with us. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.